They're people.
Yay!
So excited.
So exciting. An
It's so
actual
great.
live
People. It's-
in-person event. It's a
Oh my God.
thrill.
We thought that there might not be people here, so we
We got some
asked for a
wine.
little, you know, a
Cheers.
little refreshment. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers to live
Thank you
in-person
so
events.
much for coming.
Cheers. And cheers to a wonderful book.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many of you have read The Last Mona Lisa, but I just finished it recently, and it's just what the doctor ordered. It's a wonderful book. Interestingly, when I first started publishing, I asked my editor, there's always this talk about a big book. You've got to write a big book. What does a big book mean? I never knew what that meant, And so I asked my editor, and she said a big book is something that you can take away some knowledge from, that you can learn something from. And The Last Mona Lisa is a really big book. I learned so much about Italy, about art, and it's a great, ripping, incredible story. It's got everything. It's got different time periods. And it's based, first of all, what I wanted to ask you about is it's based on an actual true story that I never knew anything about until I read this big book.
You can keep calling it that.
It's a very big book.
Yeah,
big. The Mona Lisa was stolen and held for ransom, which is shocking to me. I never knew that. It's a true story. I would love to ask you, how did you first find out about this, and how did that eventually spin into a fictional tale?
Well, yes, it was. The Mona Lisa was stolen in 1911. It wasn't ransomed. The thief didn't ransom it until 2 years later. And basically what I did in the book is I created the story that's in between those 2 years, because not everybody knows what went on during that time. So the book mixes fact and fiction. How did I discover that? Long time ago, I was reading this little pamphlet about the Louvre Museum, and they mentioned, like, in one sentence, that the Mona Lisa had been stolen. And it stayed in my mind. I researched it. I found it. And then I just went into this deep dive of research about the theft and all these things. And I mean, in a certain way, I may be embarrassed to say I started the book 11 years ago, really big book, but I didn't work on the book for 11 years. I don't want anybody to think that I'm insane.
11 solid years.
Yeah.
Nothing else went on.
Never did anything. No, I started the book and I put it away because it was too big a book. No, I really felt like it was a huge thing, and I wasn't sure how to tackle it. I knew I wanted to write a book between the past and the present. And I wanted a contemporary book. I didn't want, a nonfiction book. I didn't want a book that was about, just what had happened. I wanted to sort of explode that story and create a story for it. So that took me a long time. I had about 100 pages. I put those 100 pages away. I didn't take them out till maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And then I took them out. I didn't hate them, which is a good sign, but I needed to rethink what it was. I mean, I think this is something I've been saying a lot, and I know that, you as a writer know this, that one of the things when you're writing a book, any book, big book, small book, whatever it is there's a ton of work in making that thing, but you never want that on the page. And because this was such a complicated book for me, what I didn't want is for anybody else to think that. Well,
you achieve that because it's seamless, and it's a real accomplishment, though, because The Last Mona Lisa is told through several different points of view over basically 2 different time periods.
Right.
So you also have first person when you're doing your main character, who's Luke, who is the great grandson of the Mona Lisa thief. You've got the actual Mona Lisa thief, Vincent, who in journal entries,
Yeah.
you have other characters, including an Interpol agent, which I wanted to ask you more about, research that would go into that, from the present day. And yet, and it goes back and forth, and yet it all reads seamlessly. Did you write it in order? Did you write each part one at a time? How did you just weave all of this together? And did it come? And how terrible was your first draft? Make me feel better.
Oh, well, you know, I think I see my agent out here. Yes. And she can tell you how bad that first draft was. Because Jane was an editor and remains an editor and is an excellent editor. Sometimes kind of ferocious as an editor, but you know, okay, so I did not do that thing where I wrote, let's say I'm going to write all the things in the past and I'm going to write all the diary stuff. No, I didn't do that. I just tried to tell the story. Now I had to invent the diary entries, and that was, I think that in some ways was the most difficult. What I wanted to do was tell this guy, Vincenzo Perugia, who becomes Vincent in the book. I wanted to tell his story through these diary entries, and I needed a voice for him. I mean, you wouldn't notice this, but there's like no commas in any of that writing. They're all these simple declarative sentences.
Yes.
You did notice?
I did. And I also noticed that you have a lot of conversations, but there's no dialogue because people don't write dialogue in their diaries.
Correct.
I thought that it came across as a diary, yet it's still told.
Well, that was kind of, it was difficult. I say now in my head, oh, that was fun, but I don't know. Maybe not,
I'm not going to do
that. But you know what was fun was I have a kind of cinematic brain because I grew up in the movies, you know. I'm really worried about the movies going away, by the way. I mean, to me, that's such a tragedy. But anyhow, so I have to see everything. And so, you know, the diary entries, they're being written, they're right there. And then you go into the past. And so I wanted those to become like blow up into movie scenes. You know, you have Vincent writing these diary entries, which are often horrible and filled with sadness and stuff. And then you go into his story. And I wanted to make those come to life. So you're right, there are all of these different things. It reminds me that, I don't know, I had gone to graduate school in painting. You can imagine what my parents thought of that. And after graduate school, my mother said, well, you went to graduate school in painting for 2 years. Take me to a museum or a gallery. So I took her to galleries in Soho, and we walked into the show, a Robert Ryman white painting show, which, believe me, was very hard to explain to my mother. And she said, well, these look really easy. And I said, let me ask you a question, Mom. When you go to the ballet, do you want to see the ballerinas sweat?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way I feel about writing, you know, so like there's all these things. There's Vincent in the past, there's his diary, there's Luke in the present, there's somebody who's suspicious that we don't know about, there's several points of view, but
there's a terrifying collector, like a really scary, that's one of the scariest characters.
I kind of love him.
He's terrifying.
Kind of love him.
Anyway.
You know, but you know how you kind of, you know, people say to you like, so who's your favorite character? Well, your favorite character is the character you're writing at that moment, right?
Yeah, when you were writing it, if you were writing it all in order, were you like, I'm kind of tired of Luke right now. I'm gonna shift over to, or was it more of a kind of, do you outline? Are you?
No, I don't outline. Yeah. Although I wish I outlined, because I think it would make it easier. No, I don't outline. What I do, which is a weird thing, maybe, is, well, I do two things, but one of them is that maybe every few days or week, I have yellow legal pads, and for some reason I have to write down every single scene in order, and then I have to see them at once. So I scotch tape the yellow legal pad pages, so they become like a scroll.
Yeah.
And I throw them away because I do that every week. You know, I also do when I'm really confused. This book was a great one for writing students where I put every scene on an index card.
Mhm.
And what I would do is, because I was going to say, because I'm visual and I'm an artist. No, because I can't keep anything in my brain. I color coded them.
That's what
You
Laura
know?
Lippman does that too.
Laura does. But
Yeah.
Laura does these scrolls. Laura Lippman, whose book Dream Girl I just read, so good.
Yeah.
Laura came here, Crime Fiction Academy, at the Center for Fiction, and she brought one of her scrolls that she does while she's working. I said, "What's this over here?" She said, "Oh, it's where my baby daughter threw up." I thought it was some sort of
Plot twist.
some sort of crescendo in the important part of the plot. But I did those, and I tried to, I
Yeah.
think a book can be very malleable, don't you think, in a way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely gone, but I do have to say I've written books where I've had dual timelines, and I've gone from past to present, and it's that I would say, yeah, it's easier to do that than you think. But reading your book with all those points of view, first person and third person.
Don't make people scared. It's really
No, but I'm saying
easy to read.
It's very easy to read, and it really is seamless. Like, I couldn't imagine the story being told any other way. So it's really fascinating.
Isn't that, this is going to be a little mutual admiration, because I was just saying to Alison, I read the advanced reader copy of her book, The Collective, that comes out in November. And I can't say anything about it, but it has a kind of amazing climactic scene. But what I believed about that scene is what I believe about all art, that's writing, paintings, everything, which is to be unexpected but inevitable, so that your reader or your viewer doesn't say, huh? No,
Yeah.
so that they think, oh, well, I didn't really see that coming. But then, yes, all those pieces fall together.
That has to be earned. Exactly. Yeah.
And so I never thought when I was writing, well, I'm sick of Luke, let me go here. I actually loved Luke, but I love them, as I said, I mean, Luke is a complicated character. I love that everybody always thinks that you're the character.
Yeah.
So yes, by the way, I am 35. I am 6'2". I am extremely handsome. I have multiple girlfriends, though none of them work out. Yeah, and I don't drink anymore.
Cheers. Cheers to that.
Luke's a recovering alcoholic. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm actually writing a recovering alcoholic in my current book that I'm working on now, my work in progress. Why did you choose to make it? He's somebody who had a very difficult, or not difficult, but just wild.
Yeah, he was a bad boy.
He was a bad boy. Yeah. And so, and he blacked out for, periods in the past.
Yep.
But now he's very controlled. He's very
Well, he has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, he has to be.
And there's always that danger that he might fall off.
Yeah, I have. Lucky for me, I happen to have like 3 good friends who are recovering alcoholics. So at one point, I asked one of my friends, who will go nameless. I said, "So tell me," and I use this in the book. I said, "So tell me what it was that made you stop drinking." And he said, "I'm pretty sure it was waking up in a dumpster." And I used
in the
that
book.
line.
Yes.
I said, "I'm going to use it. I'm obviously not attributing that to you." I think it's really interesting to have a flawed character, because we're all flawed characters. And, Luke is kind of, he's been obsessed with his great grandfather, with this criminal, because he's had, and he wants to find out about him, and he has this opportunity.
And he has a lot of similarities to his great grandfather, at least the way I saw. Like, the sort of they're definitely related.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing about Luke and about Vincent is they are artists, and it's like, and I've taught at the Center for Fiction too. And, I always think that the way scenes are described tell you more about the character describing them than about the actual scene. your book, one of the things that makes it so interesting and cinematic is the way that a man like Luke looks at the world. He notices things that other people might not notice. And when it's also a very romantic book, which is interesting.
I know.
And he's looking at this woman that he is kind of falling in love with. And he not only notices the things a man would normally notice about her, he notices the down on her skin. And I think like only an artist would kind of pick out that detail. And if you put that in another book, it wouldn't ring true. In this book, it tells you about this character. It tells you the way he looks at the world, which I find so interesting.
I kind of forgot that.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm here to remind you.
well, I'm going to tell you where I took that from, which will tell you all how old I am. So when I was 13 years old, and I used to work in the summers for my father, who was in the dress business, and he had a little dress company. He was a really tough boy from Queens, but he put himself through college in the dress business, and he created this very fancy line of clothes. And anyhow, so this actress came to buy clothes by the name of Marilyn Monroe.
Oh my God.
And one of the things, I mean, she spent 4 hours there, 3-4 hours. And one of the things I remembered is that she had this kind of soft down. I mean, she was sitting talking to me. I was madly in love with her. And I was just a little boy, but anyhow, I remembered that, and I used that detail in the book. But I don't, who knows? I mean, you create these characters, but they create themselves on the page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No character has ever come to me like full blown. Mm-hmm. Never, not Luke, not Alex. So you asked about the Interpol agent, Smith. I kind of wanted that, and I didn't know this till I was writing it, but that I wanted these two men to be sort of parallels, that both had had, let's say, challenging lives, and that I don't want to tell too much, but I think their relationship to me is kind of really important to the book, because I believe that what we need, this sounds corny, but what we need in the world is to understand somebody else, to have empathy for that person. And these are two guys who don't like each other, and so how are they going to have this empathy for one another? I didn't know anything about Interpol. I did a lot of research, and then I got to meet an ex-Interpol. It's actually a woman, and she told me a whole lot of stuff, that I didn't know, that nobody really knows, that they don't do anything really. I mean, I mean, that's not true, but they farm out their work to local police. So in the book, I mean, it doesn't give anything away because it's right at the beginning, but my Interpol agent has gone rogue. I mean, he should not be doing this. So I felt like Luke Peroni, who's searching for his great grandfather's diary and has bolted out of his life, and John Washington Smith are both taking these huge risks in their life. They escape their lives, and they're taking a huge risk and a chance. And that I kind of love that on the page, because I'm not like that at all. I just, I barely leave my house, but so, to have that kind of adventure of somebody who would do that is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I forgot what you asked me, Alison.
Well, no, no, you definitely.
It was about the down.
I was asking about
the art stuff.
Having a character who's an artist.
I should keep drinking this.
how it sort of informs the writing, and that kind of leads to my next question, which is you are an artist and a writer. Which came first, and how do they inform each other? Like, are you an artistic writer or a writerly artist? Both?
Well,
how do they work together?
Well, I like Luke. I am like Luke in this way. I was a terrible student, like in junior high school, I was terrible, but I managed to get to art school because I had a great portfolio, because I could draw. And art school changed my life. It was like I was suddenly with I was with, as I said, the best artists from every high school everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was just fantastic. And so I loved arts. All I ever wanted to be was an artist. And then I did that and I was okay. I had a kind of okay career. And then like 22, 23 years ago, I was having this sort of mini retrospective show, and it opened on a Friday. They had collected all my paintings for 10 years, not all my paintings, the best of my paintings from museums and collectors. And I also gave them my 6 newest paintings, which my assistant had to build boxes. They were wet. So they went to this exhibition and it opened on a Friday night and the building burned down the next morning. So 10 years of my work burned up overnight.
God.
And, I can talk about it now because it's like at the time it was horrible, but I also understand now it's just stuff. Nobody died. It was pretty traumatic then. And I started writing because I couldn't paint. So I would say this, I used to be an artist who liked to write. I'm no longer an artist. I'm now a writer who likes to, I draw every day. I do commission paintings for people. I do legal forgeries, which is quite fun. I really do. And, but I'm not a serious, like that kind of artist anymore. And, honestly now, like if I go with, I still have a lot of serious artist friends. And if I go to their openings, I'm so relieved it's not me. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't have to feel that pressure. And, like, I feel the pressure of a book, of course, but it's slightly different. So
is the process similar for you? Like painting and
I think, I think all creative efforts are similar. I really believe that. But painting is so much more fun. I mean, you're standing up, you're listening to music, you're writing a book, you're sitting at a computer. It's really not sexy.
Yeah.
Painting is fun, it's really fun. And it's also something I knew I was good at. Not that I was good at it. I was born with that little gift, Writing is harder for me. So, but I do love the thing that, when you're writing that, you could just, I thought about it so much during quarantine because I worked throughout quarantine, how lucky I was to be able to go into these places in my head, and get out of my little life.
It's an escape. It really is. I know. And there's something to be said for just the simultaneous torture and rescue of writing. It's it can be actual, just horrible torture, but it can also help you to escape into a different world. And if I always feel, and I think you do too, that if I'm not telling a story, that there's sort of a part of me that isn't working, it's not.
Yeah, I think, one of the great things is that's what you want to give to your reader. I think, one of the nice things about this book that people have said to me, if they like it, but one of the things they also like is that they get to go to Florence and they get to go to Paris and they get to, I did all those things. I went behind the scenes. There's a scene in the book, which doesn't really give too much away because the thief in real life, he was caught. He was a little bit ridiculous. He tried to ransom the painting, the Mona Lisa. He went to the Uffizi, he took it with him in, Florence, and he tried to sell them the painting. Well, they said, no, you're arrested, and they put him in jail. So this is the weird and wonderful thing about the writing life. So I have this friend, Judd Tully, who is like the art man, auction, just covers all the auctions. He's been doing that forever. So he said, listen, Johnny, when you go to Florence, you have to look up my friend Lorenzo Pezzettini. And I said, okay. So I meet Lorenzo Pezzettini for a drink, terrific guy, Florentine artist. And he says, I just had a show at L'Umarate. I'm saying, isn't L'Umarate a prison? Wasn't it? That's the prison where Vincent was. And he said, well, the prison's a monument. It still exists, but there's this tiny little contemporary art place. I said, I got to get into the prison. You got to get me into the prison. And he called the director of the art place. And the next day I got to be in the prison.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And there are some prison scenes in the book that are very visceral. I mean, this is what I sort of comes back to what I was saying before about how your art informs your writing, because, you know, I read your work. I don't know very much about art beyond being a person who likes to go to museums and knows what I like. But you are able to describe these experiences in such a visceral way. The prison scenes, but also the paintings and the sort of emotional effects that the paintings have on the viewer, which you are able to see it without actually seeing it. You know, it's really interesting to me, and I'm, you know, it's kind of fascinating how you are able to kind of blend those two things. It's just, I'd like to know what it's like to be really, really good at two things.
Well, that's all I'm good at, because I'm terrible at everything else.
Well,
no, really. I mean, let me just get some pity here. I was the last boy chosen for every single sport. Do you know what that does to your ego? Like, the worst.
Yeah,
and my parents made sure it would be painful. They sent me to sports camp. Yeah, that was fun. But you know, I love art, and I wanted to give that to my reader.
Yeah.
I wanted them to experience it. I wanted, without it being a travelogue, without it being an analysis, you know?
It's not, that's what's so interesting about it. It's the way the art in the book is described. It's described with the same emotion and passion as you would write a scene that was, you know, a murder scene or a romantic scene or anything else that you would get emotionally involved with. And that's what makes the book very unusual and also just very kind of addictive and immersive.
Well, that's good. I mean, I love those parts, but I think they're, you know, they're equal to me. And the fact I've never written a romance,
right?
You know? I mean, I'm going to knock this table over too, but you know, that to me, there's a romance in the present and there's a romance in the past.
Yeah.
And this is probably saying too much, but not really. So in my head, I picture the couple in the past and the couple in the present being the same people. And when you said to me that Luke and his great grandfather are the same, I think Luke becomes his great grandfather as the book goes on, you know?
Yeah.
And, but it was, you know, well, Jane is here, and Jane kept saying, like, I don't quite believe that romance. I don't quite believe. I was like, you know, but
what did you do to make it more believable?
I don't know. I kept rewriting it. I kept trying to, I guess I kept trying to, as we do, like try and like be in that and to not write it from the outside and to try and understand what these people felt for each other, you know?
Yeah.
And bringing my own experience to that, you know, I mean, my limited romantic experience, but I did try and, you know, we do try and bring what we have, and then you have to go beyond that. You have to expand it, you know, because your experiences are limited. I think it's good. I don't mean to keep putting Jane on the spot, but to be pushed. Do you know what I mean? To be pushed to do your best work. And you know, when I was in graduate school, I had this teacher, George McNeil, and I thought he was really old. He was 60, I think. And, you know, I was 21. So, and I remember saying to him, you know, I'm never going to do that. And he said, you have no idea what you're not going to do. But he gave us great advice for life. He said, keep your life simple, put all of your angst and emotion into your work. And I think I do that in the writing, you know. I mean, I don't really do it in the painting anymore. And I think that is part of, you know, the romance, the thrills. I also think I have now trained myself to become a thriller writer. You know, I'm just embarrassed to say that I wrote a memoir that was a very emotional book for me. And several of the reviews said it reads like a thriller. And I thought,
that's
oh my God,
interesting.
what is wrong with me? But I think it's the way, that my mind believes that a book is like, it has an engine and it's just going forward all the time.
Yeah. You want to tell a story, and a story is propulsive, and you want to keep people interested and keep them turning the pages. I was going to ask you about that experience of writing this memoir, which was deeply personal. I loved it. I didn't find it quite so much like a thriller,
Good.
but it was a post-love story, I guess you could call it. And it's very deeply personal. And I'm wondering if you have felt, going back to fiction after writing The Widower's Notebook, did your writing change? Did your process change? Did it affect you in any way?
I think everything changed. I think everything about me changed. Everything about my life changed. Everything about my work changed. The last Mona Lisa, I have not published a book since 2000, a novel since 2009. I could not write fiction. My life just my personal life got thrown off course. And I didn't plan to write that memoir, but I kind of was writing this stuff, and then I was encouraged. Actually, I was encouraged by many women writers who said, men don't write books like this. You really should do it. And so I kept doing it, but it changed how I guess it changed how I feel about all my work. Like, look, fiction is fiction, and you make stuff up and you want it to be thrilling and stuff, but I always want it to ring true. I don't want it to ever feel like, oh, I also don't want the reader to think, like, see me over their shoulder pulling the strings.
Yes.
I hate that.
Yeah.
So you have to write until you're outside the work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Exactly. It's sort of like, making a friendship or whatever. You don't want somebody, like, you can see their motives and they're only being friends with you for such and such a reason, whatever.
Right.
It's when you're writing something, it's like your only motivation should be to tell your story. And
I'm sitting here thinking, so because as I said, I knew I was doing this with Alison, and I know Alison's work, but I got this arc of this forthcoming novel. So I was upstate I was writing, and I was reading Alison's book at night, and it's like a ferocious book, And so I have to think in my head the way people think about me.
Right.
Like, I know Alison, she's not a monster. But this book
I've had that.
You know what I mean? But the book is wild. It's so great. But, people always, it doesn't happen to you when you're a painter because it's not words on a page. But when you write words on a page, everybody says, oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Of course it's not
right.
you. Even if you want it to be as real and as honest as you can write it, you're telling a story. Yeah,
you're taking little parts of you and you're putting it in there. Yeah. But that is true. People think, wow, I don't want to get on their bad side.
I'm a really scary guy.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I actually think people in the crime fiction community, of which we are both long-time members, tend to be the nicest people, because we get all those things out of our system. And I think there's a reason why you want to write a thriller or you want to write a crime book, because there's so much chaos in this world, right? And most of the time, nothing really gets resolved, and it sucks. And if you write a crime fiction book, or if you put something together and you can give all that chaos sort of a shape and a beginning, middle, and end, and then sometimes either the bad guy pays, or maybe the bad guy gets away with it, or maybe they're not such a bad guy. And
what you're talking about
is
so it's like what all art does. It takes something and gives it a new form. It takes something and creates some sort of tangible form. So it's a book, it's painting, it's a drawing, it's a play. This is what art does. It takes this other stuff and it tweaks it to this other level. It gives it a structure.
Yeah.
And it's why art is so much more satifying than life.
It is. That's why we do it. I really think that's true.
There's this great interview, which I read a long time ago. It's with Joseph L. Mankiewicz, the movie director, producer, writer, All About Eve and lots of things. And he's being interviewed by this young writer. And the writer says, I really love your work, but your dialogue just it's not realistic. And Mankiewicz says, well, of course not. It's movie dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, because you're always pushing this to you want it in your ear. The dialogue has to be real, but it's something else.
Yeah. There's something else to it.
There's something else. Right?
And I took playwriting in college, and one of the things we had to do was just eavesdrop tape record a conversation between people and transcribe it. It's like the most boring thing ever. Hopefully this conversation won't be quite that boring. But even so, if I were writing this conversation, I wouldn't have my character say, but even so, it's
as they got drunker.
As they drank more wine. But yeah, exactly. It's something, it's just trying to create a shape out of something that's kind of shapeless.
And then, it goes back, this idea of a big book. I never really thought of this as a big book until it was finished and other people told me it was a big book.
It's huge.
It is a huge book. Yeah. I mean,
in a wonderful way.
Well, I think it was Lee Child who said, "You can die now. You did this great big book." I was like, "Oh, thanks." Okay.
Thank you.
But I didn't think that, and hopefully not, because I am writing another book.
Yeah.
It'd be very dramatic, if I do.
So you are writing a sequel to this book.
Yeah.
So how has that been, just sort of getting back with those characters?
I like it. I love these characters. I wasn't finished with these people.
Yeah.
I just wasn't finished with them. In the middle of, not the middle, I was finished with this book and I had this other idea. And then we have a mutual friend, the wonderful writer, Megan Abbott. So Megan Abbott was one of my COVID circle. I had a group of people who were my COVID circle. We'd see each other somehow. Like a lot of people came and we were on my roof and we'd have drinks. And I told Megan about this idea and she said, "You have to look up this guy, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Oh, I know that name." She said, "Yeah." And then I did, and it exploded into this new idea for this book.
Okay.
So so I'm doing that. But
Megan's a really good idea giver.
she's a really good idea giver, and Megan at least appears very sure of herself when she tells you something like, "This is what you should do."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to be, it's both great and difficult to be writing a book when you have a book that's just come out.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's good because then I don't have to think about this book so much.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely. It gets your mind off of it.
Yeah. Are you setting up to ask people, to have people questions?
Yes. So we're opening it up to questions now from.
Because otherwise we're just going to keep drinking.
We'll
and
just
talking.
keep chatting about our process. Oh, great.
I know this guy. He's
Hello,
trouble. He's trouble.
I know this guy too.
Is the theft the best thing that ever happened to that painting?
Yes, that's a great question because Leonardo da Vinci made, we now know, 16 oil paintings in his life. That's all. I mean, he did it. We know him because, he's one of the big boys of the Renaissance, the High Renaissance. The notebooks, the drawings, the circulatory system, the flying machines. But in terms of oil paintings, he was a slacker. I mean, really did 15 paintings until the new one, the Salvator Mundi painting. Anyhow, that painting was, because there's not a lot of them, it was important, but it was not a big deal painting, And then it got stolen. They had more Parisians come and line up to get into the Louvre to look at the wall, where the empty space on the wall, than they had ever come to see the actual painting. So it was gone for 2 years. That, you know, it became like this iconic thing. I mean, it has an amazing history. And then it toured Italy, and then it came, and, you know, people came to see it again. The French Revolution, by the way, that we have to go earlier.
Mhm.
It has a great history because, you know, it was on Napoleon took it when he took power, and he put it on his bedroom wall. So she has some stories to tell.
That's right.
But yeah, it turned the painting into this iconic master. I mean, look, it's a nice painting, small, very nice. Leonardo kept it with him his whole life. You know, it was a commissioned painting. The Giardini family. Giardini was a silk merchant, done a lot of research. And Lisa Giardini was his third wife. First two died in childbirth. He married her, she was very young, and they commissioned this portrait, and he never gave them the portrait. He never gave it to them. I wonder if he took money and never gave it back. But it was with him when he died in France.
Wow.
So he kept the painting with him, and he kept painting on it, you know, building it up, thin layers, the way he painted. It is, I mean,
And he had a few false starts on
well,
that painting, right?
all painters do, you know, you're
Yeah.
drawing on the painting in paint, and in the
Mhm.
book,
Yeah.
the painting X-rays have just been invented when that painting's stolen, and the thief gets his hands on the forger gets his hands on the X-rays, which is important. But
It's
yeah,
a fascinating chapter, just how a forger would go about.
I loved writing those scenes because I felt like I know what it's like to be a forger. It's both really exciting to slip into the skin of another artist, and it's also really kind of sad
Mhm.
that you're not doing your work, that you're doing somebody else's, you know?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
fascinating.
Anybody else
Any
with
other
a question, or
Just keep talking.
we'll keep talking
People
about
are
that?
thinking about their while people are thinking about their questions in this audience, we can move to one from the Zoom, which I was there. If the authors are taking questions, what, if anything, have they learned about their writing and maybe themselves working during this time, pandemic and current issues? And this is from Joe.
You have to repeat that. I'm missing, you heard it? I'm obviously. Yeah.
What, if anything, have you learned about your writing and maybe yourselves during this time, pandemic and current events?
Pandemic, current events.
Well, you know, I will say this, that spending my life in this weird occupation of being an artist and a writer, it was like I was preparing for quarantine my whole life. I mean that seriously. You know, I spent so much time alone that I didn't feel so knocked off my game, you know?
Mhm.
I did feel lonelier than I do because I spent so much time alone. I'd normally go out a lot, and I didn't. But I think I learned writing the book. I think taught me that I could write a book that was so complex and make it not seem complex, and that I learned. Did I learn anything about myself? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's a little hard at this point in my life, you know. It's like an ex-student of mine wrote to me, he's now a life coach, and he wanted to be my life coach. I was like, what are you, crazy? I mean, I'm like, I gotten this far. I don't need a life
Without a coach.
What are you gonna coach me on? Do you have a question there?
Yes, I do. Something that is really amazing to me about the mystery thriller genre is that you create a lot of intrigue by not having information there, which is much more complicated to actually write than to just omit information. And so I was wondering if you had any advice on how you write that, or any insight into what the process is like.
I think we can both answer that in terms of what you withhold and what you tell,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think that I feel as if the reader should be ahead of the characters. In other words, the readers know more, and you've given the readers more information than the characters know. You know, it's like my Hitchcock thing. Like I studied Alfred Hitchcock, like I know all his movies by heart. And Hitchcock, you know, he storyboarded, he made drawings of every scene. So, and you know, he said this thing like, so Alison and I are here talking, right? Blah, 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 blah. But what we don't know is underneath us is a bomb. And you know that because you all can see it. We can't see the bomb under the table. So we're talking like, what have I learned? Nothing. Alison's saying like, nice book, big book. I'm thinking, thank you. You're all thinking they're about to be blown to bits.
Right.
So you're like, you know, so that's part of it, right?
Yeah. And also I feel like it's, don't mistake point of view for everything that's going on in the story. So like when I'm writing a scene, like this book that Jonathan is talking about, The Collective, that's coming out, that's all first person point of view. It's like the opposite of Jonathan's book. It's just one, it's first person, present tense, first time I've ever done that in my life. But I know what's going on in the mind of every other character in every scene. So I know what story is happening around this character that she doesn't know. So I think you have to know everything. So yes, you are not revealing a lot of information, but you have all that information. So you know what everybody thinks, and then it's sort of how it comes
It's so
out.
interesting because I just read this book. I had no idea it was totally first person. I never thought of that.
Yeah, it's all first person, and I've never done that before.
And so,
it was,
you know, like what writers, as writers, you have to make that decision. Is it first person? Is it close third? Is it totally omniscient? I didn't think about it because I was aware of everything around that character. So I didn't think, but of course you're right. Now when I think of the book, we're inside her head, right? From the beginning.
yeah, and it's only a certain kind of book you can do that with, because it's very rare that I think you can do that, especially first person, present tense, linear storytelling.
Yes, I was jealous of you using the present tense because I love the continuous present because it's so immediate, and I don't know.
But it only works in some cases, really.
I know,
very rare
I know.
cases.
Worked in your book tremendously. I was aware of that. I never thought of just first person, but as the writers who are listening, you know, you have a choice when you write a book, which is if you go with the first person, it's really close. You know, it's the reader's inside the head of this person, and they get that person. But you have a very limited point of view.
Right, but you are not. So the reader is, and you are, but you have to know what's going on in the head of every other person in every scene. And there's so much going on. So I have to, if this were a book about me and Jonathan, you know, and I were writing it.
Right?
Yeah, that it's going to be about this. Exactly. That's it. But yeah, that is the big challenge of writing suspense or crime fiction in general, is like you have to, you really sort of have to know everything that's going on, even though you're only telling a small part of it. It's like you've got to see that whole pie, even if you're just giving a piece to everybody.
Yeah, I think that I think I was going to write that the last Mona Lisa in the third person so I could know everyone, but I ended up breaking the rule, which is I kept changing points of view. And you know, people, I've done that in other books, and people say you can't do that. You have to stick to your point of view. Like, no, it
really works actually.
But if you make it seamless and the reader isn't like jolted out of this thing, you just have to make it work, right? I mean, that's your job as a writer, as a painter, as whatever you're doing, as a poet. I remember when I was a young artist, I was in a theater group with Marcia Tucker, who created the New Museum. And Marcia Tucker is a little bit forgotten, which is too bad because she changed the art world dramatically. She was a curator at the Whitney. And we had this group called the Mighty Oaks. And one of the exercises we did was about truth and lies and how art was a convincing lie. And that's kind of I don't like to
Yeah.
think of that, but of course that is what you're doing a little. You have to know everything. You have to convince the reader, and they have to be with you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have one more question from the Zoom, and this is going to be our final question of this wonderful conversation. This is from Carolyn, another one about craft. I'm actually in the process of writing a book about a Raphael forgery. What tips or advice do you have for simplifying a complicated topic, yet still making the story interesting?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's true for every book in a way, because what Alice and I were saying before is your job and any kind of art you're making is to structure it and is to distill it into being the most, you're making choices throughout, right?
Mhm.
Everything's a choice. When you're making a painting, you choose to paint over that or bring in that color. So I don't know if you do. So maybe it's because this is a big book. I tended to start to think of this book as a big symphonic thing.
Yeah.
And I do think, so like there's the quiet periods, which you have to earn. You got to kill somebody if you want quiet for 5 pages, or, something big has to happen. But I think if you're writing a book, anything you're doing needs to go through that process in your mind,
Yeah.
and you're selecting, you're choosing.
Yeah,
What's-
I think that one of the things that, I mean, what I was talking about earlier with the way artwork is described in the
Mhm.
last Mona Lisa is that I feel like, and I'm not quite sure even how you did this, but you connect with it, with describing a work of art emotionally in a way that you're able to convey that emotion to the reader. And I think that's sort of the key with everything, whether you're writing a love scene, a fight scene, a scene about art, a scene about Raphael, you need to just focus and hone in and laser focus on the emotion. And then that's what people can relate to, because emotions are the thing that we hang all of these books on. It's like whether you're writing a memoir or fiction, you're always kind of just writing an emotion that you've experienced that you can express, and then hanging a story around it.
I
So
think that's great. I mean, I realize that, like you write and you write and you write, and sometimes you write to get to here, and then you can throw all of that away.
yeah,
Yeah. And then we all know when we're with any kind of work you're doing, no matter what it is, when you're just going through the motions, and when you forget and you're inside that work. And then it,
yeah,
and then you always go back and you be your own editor. And that's when you have to be analytical and see what works and what doesn't. But I think that what Alice does is like emotionally connecting with something. I mean, I think I liked having Luke, crazy Luke, but he's an artist. He's kind of a failed artist too, in many ways, which
he's going through a rough
he's going
time.
through a bad time. I have affection for him. I feel bad for him. I love him. I gave him a kind of great, sort of maybe not great girlfriend. I don't know. But
She has down on her face.
she has down on her face. She's, oh, God, no. Anyhow, yeah, I think making the right choices for whatever work you're doing is what it's about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's
So-
whatever the reader can sort of connect with. If you're emotional and passionate about something, and you're describing something, whether it's some scientific theory or a fight scene,
Yeah.
a reader will connect with it if you are able to convey the emotion.
And the last thought on that is, so like, I didn't write the art scenes any differently than anything else, though this novel has a lot to do. I mean, it's about the Mona Lisa, and so the art is very integral to the book.
Yes.
So but everything is, I didn't say, oh, I'm going to write about art now and I'm going to do this really well. No, I mean, everything has the same kind of, I
Yeah,
have to
passion.
connect. Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So, but because the story has an underpinning of like art, that that has to be, well, everything has to be believable in some way, right?
But it's great that these art scenes really, and I can say this as a reader, are as thrilling
Oh, I'm
as the
glad.
action scenes. I was emotionally involved with them, and that,
Good.
that's a feat.
That's good. All right,
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. I just, I've never done an event where I was drinking. And maybe I have found the key.
Yeah,
you
that's it.
know? But I'm so glad. Thank you. I mean, for people to come out in this time, and it's very moving to me that people are here. I thank you for that. I thank Alison, whose book knocked me